Welcome to How to Create Highly Engaging Discussion Forums. My name is Taylor Kendrick, and I'm an instructional designer at Stanford University in Birmingham, Alabama. Over the years, as an instructional designer, I've heard many complaints from instructors and students about having to use the discussion forum. And I've spent a lot of time helping instructors to create more student engagement with deeper learning activities. But possibly one of the most powerful tools in the LMS is the discussion forum feature. But unfortunately, many continue to not use it and, in fact, underutilize it. So today, I want to share with you 10 tips on how to make discussion forums highly engaging and help construct deeper learning for students. So to begin with, I think all of us could look at these particular discussion forum posts and immediately see what the problem is. That you have students who are posting, they're summarizing, they're saying, I agree and I like. I love some of these examples that I pull from the internet. So the first one is about from Blackboard. It says, you must reply to two classmates. Classmate says, the war occurred in 1812. The response is, I agree, the war did occur in 1812. I think this is a perfect example of what we often see in discussion forums. We see things where students are summarizing what's been said, or they're just agreeing and liking other people's statements. If you look over at the very last one where Jim, he has 2 + 2 is 4. And the response is, wow, Jim, I totally agree. I like how you added the 2's together and got 4. Very insightful. So, why are so many discussion forums not effective? I think that ultimately students are bored. That, as I said before, they tend to summarize without really engaging with the instructional content. They respond with the statements such as I agree or I like. And students oftentimes will wait to the last moment to post, which causes a lack of depth to their post and ultimately waters down the value of the discussion forum. So what I wanted to address today is this idea of how we can get that engagement up and make sure the forum is actually used in the way it's supposed to be used. I've created these tips based off of my own experience with my faculty and also some reading and research, but ultimately it's come out of just, working in the trenches, seeing what works. So let's start off with tip number 1. The very first thing that I would really encourage anyone to do when they're creating a discussion forum is to clearly state the expectations for the discussion forum. What does that involve? Well, it's going to involve sharing how long they should post. Should it be a certain word count or a certain number of sentences, or should it be a number of paragraphs? You need to give them a very specific information on this. I actually tend to go toward word count because in the Canvas LMS, it actually has a word count in the reply box. So let students keep up with that. Another thing I encourage is to remember to always tell students to reply or respond to fellow students. So many different discussion forums that I've seen over the years do not encourage students to respond to one another. And honestly, that is one of the most important features of the discussion forum, is for the students to respond back and forth to each other. If they're not doing that, then there's not much reason for them to post in the discussion forum. So I would encourage you to make sure that you tell them to post it or respond to each other, maybe one or two other students, and also help them understand that they don't need to say agree or disagree or summarize what they've said, but actually engage with what the other person has said. So some other things that you could include would be to use proper grammar, to use citations from an article or a textbook. I also would encourage you to tell them, hey, you need to respond by a certain time frame. So don't just let it be open-ended. So maybe it's a week-long discussion. They have to post by Wednesday, and then respond to someone else by Saturday or something like that. One of the other big things that you can do is what I call adding value, and help the students to see how their contributions to the discussion forum can add value to their learning and to the learning of others. Finally, one of the other things that is very helpful is to make sure that you tell the students, or not tell, but provide the students an example of a good post, an example of a poor post. So you can do that within the instructions area. So, again, you need to clarify your expectations of them. Tip number 2 would be to clarify your role. So now you've set the expectation of what you want from them. Now you're going to tell them what you're going to provide them. You need to describe what you're going to be doing in the forum. Are you going to participate, or are you going to just let them participate? You also need to let them know when and how you plan on sharing feedback. And ultimately, by adding these 2 components, you help manage their expectations. I know for me as an online student, I expected my instructor to be in the discussion forums. And when they were not in the discussion forums, I was disappointed because I wanted to hear from them. Obviously, you need to be thoughtful and not dominate the discussion. You need to allow the students to actually be involved and talk. So you don't have to jump in every second to try to correct something that's wrong. Actually, research has proven that 3 peer reviews is equal to 1 expert review. So if you give the forum enough time, if there's a bad ideas going around, it might get actually corrected by your students, and there's some deep learning that goes on, and then you can come back and maybe summarize and add something in. But you do need to participate and clarify your role in the discussion forum. So number 3 is you want to work on creating unique and content-specific prompts. So you want to gear your prompts toward the specific content that the students are working on. So you want to help direct them to the content so that they can bypass all the clutter and the information overload. You want to focus the questions about the most relevant and pertinent content. And you want to encourage students to deconstruct the information and then reconstruct it in their own words. So that all happens with the prompt. And it needs to be something more than, tell me 3 things you found interesting in this particular chapter. Instead, or give me 3 quotes or something like that. It needs to be much more detailed. And along those lines, we'll take a little bit of a segue here. I came across some research on what is called the Crest Model for writing effective online discussion forum prompts. And it basically works, and there's 5 points to it. And it kind of helps you think through, as you're writing your question, how to kind of get at the most important stuff. So you can do any of these things in any particular order, and as you can see through the graph here that I've provided, but we'll start off at the top and move our way from right to left. So the first thing you need to really think about is to determine the purpose. Is this going to be reflection or debate or synthesis, compare and contrast analysis? Figure out what you want them to actually do. The second thing is you want to provide a context. What will learners respond to? What context or resources are you going to provide them? Consider having the resources available for them as part of the post. So if you have them read an article, provide it right there in the discussion so they can access it, or if it's a video. The third part of this model includes implementing experiential elements. So allow them to share their opinions if it's cited with fact. Opinions are okay, but with fact. Provide the opportunity for them to work through a scenario. Help put the students actually into the narrative of the discussion. In other words, let them take on the role of the scenario themselves. So you want to think about implementing experiential elements into the question. The fourth thing that you need to think about is determine what type of question, the question type. So is it going to be a metacognitive question where they have to think on their thinking? Is it going to be practical relevance? How do they actually apply it? Is it going to be reflective analysis? Or do they need to bring and provide more evidence? Or is it going to be cause and effect? Or maybe a case study? Or is it going to be a synthesis of information? So remember, when you're working on this question, think about the question type. What kind of question are you asking? And then finally, you're going to construct the question. And when you think about the question, think about creating a background story to it, and make something that is narrative driven, that maybe, and make sure you clearly state the question using the different features that we've kind of talked about above, through the purpose, the context, implementing experience, what the type of question is. Consider all those things as you create your question. So with that in mind, now that you've created your great question, let's move on to the next thing. As far as the question goes, you want to ultimately encourage your students to construct knowledge. And, so how do you do that? One of the best ways to do that is to use Bloom's verbs when you're creating that prompt. And link those discussion prompts back to the course or module learning objectives. Ask the students to reflect on specific pieces of instructional content and using analysis or compare and contrast, application, scenario, all the different things we've already talked about. And encourage students, as I said, opinion is okay, but encourage students as they're stating their opinion to be able to back up their opinions with actual facts and research and citations. So that's the big thing about really getting those students going with this prompt, is that you're helping them to construct knowledge. Now remember, obviously we've set expectations for them, what they're going to be doing. We have set the expectation for what you're going to be doing. And now the 3 and 4 really have been all about creating that question. Now, point number 5 is more about making it worth something to them. So I call this making it count. And, in that sense, we want to think about giving it some points. If the assignment is worth doing, make it worth a grade. I also would encourage you to use a rubric so that you can easily give feedback and also kind of break down how those points are going to be ultimately assigned. And then finally, if you are wanting to make this more of a formative type of assessment, go ahead and use that rubric. Just take the points off the rubric and make it more of a complete incomplete assignment. That way, when the students are working on it, you're really, as long as they completed what you've expected of them, they will get complete points. That allows it to be more of a formative assessment instead of a more feeling like a summative assessment with a lot of points. But at the same time, it kind of encourages them to make sure they actually do the activity and don't see it as a throwaway activity. So that's number 5, make it count. Number 6, our next tip is going to be less is more. So here we want to think about focusing on quality versus quantity. Oftentimes I'll see courses with a discussion forum every single week, which is just fine, especially if those are more formative checks to see how they're thinking, what they're doing. But a lot of times we could get more discussion and more thoughtful replies and posts if we would give them more time. So here we want to focus on quality versus quantity. Perhaps we give them a week to post and a week to reply, and ultimately we would get a more in-depth post and replies by doing this. Now, if you're going to do this, one of the things that you want to do is to make the discussion forum worth more points. Since it's going to take longer, it has a more robust sense about it. And maybe you encourage some research. Maybe you encourage them to post citations, and maybe you even encourage a presentation of some sort. I'm not really sure, but it really is dependent on your particular context. So tip number 7 is something that I believe every single online course needs to have, which was the Introduce Yourself forum. This helps to set a tone. It encourages students to get to know one another, and it immediately allows them to start forming that community. Ultimately, you want them to get to know each other, get to know you, and I would encourage every single online course to have the Introduce Yourself forum. Bonus tip on this one, I would encourage you to actually have students add a image to their profile for the LMS so that everybody can also see who they are too. Tip number 8 is mix it up. So work toward having a variety of types of online discussion forums. Instead of just doing the text-based forum, try to throw in some different ideas. Concept maps, PowerPoint presentations, Twitter type responses. You can see the list that I've provided here. And I am actually going to give you 10 alternatives to your traditional text-based forum in a minute. So I'm not going to go into all these, but the idea here is don't just do text-based every single time. Think about having them do different things so that they're not going to come back and do the exact same thing every time. You'll engage different senses this way. Number 9. Number 9 is what I call follow the leader. So instead of you being the one who has to reply to students or being involved in the forum, now it's perfectly acceptable for you to be involved, but maybe you assign a student as the discussion leader. And instead of having them kind of summarize, which is what I see happen a lot of times, what everybody else has said, have them read through all the different postings and then select 3 quotes from the forum that best kind of gives evidence of people's responses throughout the discussion forum, and then have the discussion forum leader write a reflective response based on those quotes. So I call that follow the leader, and that's a great way to get a student leader involved, and it's also a way to help keep you from having to be as involved. Number 10. This is called small groups. So if you have a large class, and I would call anything a large class that is more than 15 students, you might consider using breaking the discussion forums into smaller groups. Maybe having them in groups of 5 or 10. I know that I've studied small group dynamics, and really anything above 12 people in a small group, it gets a little bit unwieldy and unmanageable, and the dynamic of that smallness goes away. So I would encourage you to think about breaking them up into small groups. And most LMSs have a feature to break students up into student groups within the LMS. So use that feature and let them respond to the questions in their smaller groups instead of at large. So those are the 10 things. We've gone all the way from student expectations to instructor expectations to writing questions to less is more, and all the way back to small groups. And I'll be sharing the presentation for you to download if you want, and it has all the notes in there as well. Now we come to what I would call alternative types of discussion forums. And I'm just going to hit these real quick. There's 10 of them. So the first one, we'll go from right to left. First one I call two truths and a lie. Basically, the idea here is maybe you use for your course introduction something like an icebreaker. Instead of just tell us about yourself or why are you here, maybe you find a good icebreaker like 2 truths and a lie, or try to identify me by this, or your favorite restaurant there. Something that would help them get more personal and to share more about themselves. The next one I call dealer's choice. You could also call this pick your poison. But basically with dealer's choice is you provide multiple discussion prompts and allow your students to choose which one they want to answer. They only have to answer one of them. The idea is that hopefully that in the course of the discussion, the students will eventually answer all the questions prompts that are there. So it gives you the opportunity of covering more material and getting more feedback and or responses from students, and it gives you a better pulse of how they're doing in the course. The next one is called red team versus blue team. Basically is have them debate a topic, provide a point of view, assign one group to be the red team and another group to be the blue team, and then let them defend. One team is defending, one is for, one's pro, one's against. The fourth one I would suggest is role play. So create a scenario with characters and require students to respond, but have them respond in character. So they're not just responding as from the character's perspective, but they actually have to get in character and respond. Now, again, you want to make sure you're spelling all this out in your instructions. Number 5 is going to be what we call board meeting. So the discussion functions as a board meeting. You break students into groups, and each group could be working on a project and you want them to develop an agenda, work through the agenda, provide meeting notes for what's happened. As I said, this is really great for student projects and for you to kind of get updates on what's happening. Number 6 that I have here is what's called snowball prompts. So basically, each student is required to build off the previous post without duplication or restatement. Students ultimately who post early are rewarded for their initiative because they're not having to build off of someone else's what someone else had already said. A lot of reward for that first poster. I call number 7 Dutch treat. So here you would have half the class respond to the prompt, and the other half of the class would reply to the first half's responses. So half post and half reply. Number 8, I call don't quote me. So students select 3 quotes from covered content that interest them. And then they're required to explain why these quotes interest them. So they take 3 quotes from the materials and then explain the interest behind the quotes. The 4th one is what I call a meme off. This is actually something I created myself, and it kind of goes in the same idea of a Twitter type of response. But imagine if you made students to respond to your prompt only if they use a meme or a GIF. So it has to convey the idea of what they're thinking about that particular content that you've provided them. I'm sure that there could be lots of funny things that they would get going on this, and if it would be a lot of fun to see them not only respond, post with a meme, a GIF, but also reply with a meme or GIF. As I said before, this could also be like a Twitter type of a situation where they have to respond in 140 characters or less. The whole point of it is to be kind of rapid fire and to get them to be able to boil down their thoughts and ideas in something that's visual or short in number of characters. Number 10 is really more for replies. It's called 3C plus Q. This was created by a K-12 instructor many years ago. But basically, the 3 C's are when you post in a discussion forum, a reply, you compliment the post, you comment on the post, you connect with the post, and then you ask a question about the post. So you say, I like, then you say, I think, and you say, I'm similar, like the connect, and then what would you think about this? So that's what I mean by the 3 C's and a Q. Now I do have a bonus round for you. The final thought concerning discussion forums is perhaps you allow students to write discussion questions for your as the prompts. There's many benefits to this. It requires students to become familiar with the content. It ultimately demonstrates that there's value to the students in the information that they're sharing. It helps the students how to write good questions. It can also identify knowledge gaps or misinformation. And it helps students to have a sense of agency in the course, which is ultimately what we want for all of our students. And one thing that I would provide as a tip is that maybe you even do a session on how to write good questions, which you could use the Crest model as a way of doing that. But you really want to make sure students avoid the yes/no questions. Instead, you want more of the open-ended types of questions. Well, that is the 10 tips and the 10 alternatives to text-based discussion forums. I hope it's been informative for you. I've enjoyed getting to share this information with you. I've provided my information here on this particular last slide if you want to reach out to me and ever talk to me more about the subject. Have a great day.